So yes, I am Jim Tincher, CEO at Heart of the Customer, big CX fan. And but that's all you need to know about me because I am excited to have Haemi with us today. And so Haemi, tell us about yourself, your background, and why Jim keeps saying you're such a rock star on LinkedIn. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. My name is Haemi Chang, and I actually have a new title. CX is actually part of my title now. So I'm a senior director of CX and design at Marvin. I've been working with Heart of Customer and Jim for the last 2 years, building CX program from scratch. So I'm relatively new to this world. So I'm super excited to share my experience with the maturity assessment, how that's helped me. I'm hoping that that'll be helpful for others too.
All right. I'm going to share a couple of slides, just a baseline, make sure we all understand what maturity is about. Then we're going to get rid of the slides and really just dive deep into Haemi's experience at Marvin. So let's go ahead and just look quickly at, we like the XM Institute's maturity assessment and their model. It's really good that it crosses over. You can apply it to CX, brand experience, employee experience, and it's pretty comprehensive. The 6 phases or 6 capabilities being lead, realize, activate, enlighten, respond, and disrupt. The only thing we don't like about it are those names, because those names just don't mean anything. Like lead, what does that mean? And so we've gone and we've actually renamed them. The biggest one being align and sustain, but generally we have 3-word shortcuts. So realize value, can't realize that's 2. Activate the organization, enlighten with insights, respond with action, and disrupt with design. So although we're not big fans of the names, we love the model. And just to walk through what are these 6 parts. So first of all, architect, align, sustain successful customer experience efforts. Now, again, the model can be used for employee experience, brand experience. We just focus on CX here. Realize value is really critical. It's track and ensure that CX efforts achieve well-defined business objectives. Then activate the organization. Make sure everybody's on board. They have the skills, the support, and most importantly, the motivation to get those results. Then enlighten with insights. And this is the core of many programs. In fact, this is the one that overall programs are best at. Provide those actual insights. The one that organizations are not so good at, one of 2, is responding with action. Do we actually get back to make improvements and do we let our customers know about it? And lastly, disrupt with design. And so identify and create experiences to differentiate the organization. Now, actually, I misspoke a little bit. There are 3 that are pretty strong across the average CX organization and 3 that are weak. The 3 that are weak are activating the organization. We're not so good at getting people out there across it. Realize value, to actually connect it to what the organization cares about, and especially disrupt with design, which is actually really exciting since we have a designer here who is actually, their organization is even stronger than that. And so we take these 6 capabilities, we then assess them at 1 of 5 levels: initiate, investigate, initiate, mobilize, scale, and embed. Spoiler alert, the average organization is in the initiate stage. So there's a lot of rooms to improve in here to create your results. And we do that by interviewing stakeholders. Now, again, we start with 15 or 30. I was talking with a friend of mine at a CX program. He said, well, we did this assessment. My boss and I filled out the survey on the website, so we know our maturity. So that's cute. It's nice that you think you know where you are. Doesn't matter where the CX team thinks they are. What matters is what does the executive team do and what are their thoughts? And so we interview 15 to 30 stakeholders, look at your data. What do you measure? How do you measure it? And overall assess the maturity to see where you're strong and where you're weak. That then leads to a roadmap on how do we improve? What do we need to add or improve on to become more mature, which then leads at those top opportunities to how do we get better? So that's a little background on the maturity assessment. We're going to leave that here. And now we're going to get to the star of the show. And I'm going to ask some questions, Haemi, and get your feedback. And so let's start, Haemi, with tell me a little bit more about you and also about Marvin's history with customer experience.
Yeah, so as Jim mentioned, my background is in design. So I started as an architect, and I actually joined IDEO right after grad school, wanting to get into more of a design innovation field. So I am a human-centered design expert, and I've been practicing that for majority of my career. And in the last 5 years, I've shifted from IDEO to Marvin, and I've been building a group called Marvin Design Lab, really focused on design innovation, once again, practicing human-centered design. So even though I'm new to CX world, I'm not new to customer centricity. That's just how I live and breathe that. So there's a synergy there. And how I got brought kind of into the world of CX is really back in 2022. Actually, my first eye-opening experience to CX was actually at B2B conference at Heart of Customer. That's where I met Jim and everyone else. And earlier that year, our top leaders, our senior leaders at Marvin, were looking at renewing and evolving our 5-year strategy. And we knew that looking at 5 years, from now, we have to be thinking of our customer in a different way. We have to build some sort of a way to improve and enhance and elevate our experience, overall experience that customers are having with us, but didn't know how. So that's how I got engaged. That's where, I don't know if you guys know, but Marvin is a family-owned business, it's a family-run business as well. And my boss, Christine Marvin, who's a fourth-generation Marvin, also CMXO, asked me to actually lead this initiative to think about what is CX? What should it mean for Marvin? And to Jim's point, a little bit of history there, I quickly learned as I started to enter this world and understanding through our stakeholder interviews that we've actually had a little bit of messy history with CX and Marvin. We've tried many times, multiple times. We had multiple attempts at trying to build this, but we failed because it didn't stick, right? So I had to do a lot of learning as to why did it not work, what happened. So there was a little bit of messy history, but now we've gone through the maturity assessment. We've kind of figured out that CX roadmap and strategy, and now we're in year 2 and about to implement some of the exciting things that we're so excited because we've been just dying to actually go. But we took a really good, thoughtful year to really put a plan together. And I think maturity assessment really actually helped us think about where we are today and where we need to head into the future.
Well, so, actually, a good question before we get into from Michael,
Yeah.
which is asking, who are your customers? Because that's not an easy question.
Oh my gosh.
Is it B2B? Is it homeowners? Is it both? Can you walk through your different customers?
Yes. So when we talk, that was it still is actually a hard question to answer sometimes to all the different stakeholders in at our company. So we have our dealers, right? That's how we go through. That's our channel where we sell. But we have homeowners, architects, builders, right? And even interior designers, influencers. There are many people, but really we talk about 4 main customers. So again, dealers, homeowners, architects, and builders. But to start, we have to start kind of focusing on where our effort will be. So right now, we've actually gotten the alignment to really focus on dealers and winning that channel first, and our partners, who's our conduit to architects, builders, and homeowners. So that's where we're going to focus. But it's always, an ask from the organization. When are we going to start looking at homeowners? When are we going to start thinking about architects and builders? So I roughly kind of say we're primarily focused on dealers, but we will obviously continue to have conversations and learn about our other customers as well. But that's our starting point.
That's something when you think of a manufacturing company, you think B2B. And you are that, of course, but you also are a B2B2C because you do interact with homeowners.
Exactly. Especially in our business is a little bit, as all businesses are, it's a little complex. We do actually have a replacement market is a little bit more B2C. There is a little bit more interaction with homeowners. So it does get complicated, but at least I'm really happy that we're aligned on our first approach in building our CX program.
And that's really critical. We work with a lot of B2B2C organizations, and you can have, I used to lead customer experience in part of United Health Group. And if I wanted to waste half an hour, I would just use the word customer And now we would debate for the next half hour exactly what I meant.
Yes, exactly.
So we had a great conversation about a year and a half ago. I don't know if you remember, but about why would you start with maturity? Why didn't you just start by hiring a bunch of people or throwing out a survey? Why did you start with maturity?
I mean, again, I think it goes back to a little bit of the messy past. And in like, as we talked about, it starts with the stakeholder interviews, right? I think Heart of Customer, we actually partnered up and we did about 40 stakeholder interviews. So, but it was from the very first view, it was very clear that people had a certain notion and assumptions of what CX, means to Marvin or should mean to Marvin because we've, some had exposure to some of the previous CX programs and attempts, right? So there was a lot of just kind of uncertainty and misalignment on what it really is, what's the definition, and what can we accomplish, right, from putting together a CX program. So I just needed, it was a really great way to level set. It was a great, amazing way to align the entire organization, especially to your point, Jim, like our executives, our senior, leaders on the key stakeholders who are, I would say, about 6 or 7 individuals, right? SVP, VP of sales and marketing, and product management, R&D, and customer service, alongside our president and our chief digital officer as well. Just aligning on like what are those core competencies, right? Capabilities, and how do we start to define CX? So bring some definition to that and start to use common language. And then that's the one outcome. And then second outcome is actually shared understanding. Where are we starting from? Where do we think we are? So we actually did this, of course, Heart of Customer actually helped us kind of figure out where we are from all those kind of stakeholder interviews and synthesis. But we also did this exercise in our workshop. Where do we think we are, right? And did the Slido, and everyone kind of mapped it against that. So it was really interesting. It actually aligned, which is great. There wasn't a huge, difference in our opinions in terms of where we're starting, but it was a really good discussion to talk about why do we think we're at investigate versus the levels beyond that. So it was a great discussion. It was amazing alignment tool and facilitation method to actually get everyone on the same page. And the third benefit of this, as I look back, that I actually didn't realize how important this was at the moment, was it helped us to articulate where we want to be in that, right? Like as we look at level 4 and 5, it was also helpful to know, I think I asked this, Jim, is how long do most companies take to get to level 5, right? Like, and what's realistic, right? Because I want to set realistic expectations. So it was and I think the answer was it's 5+, right? And it was great to actually share that with the leaders and make sure that they feel comfortable that yes, it is a journey. It's not overnight. And do I realign that we want to be here, right, on all these competencies? Or it's okay for us to say, maybe we don't want to be at level 5 for this, but maybe we should be at level 4, 3 even. And it's a strategic choice we're making. So it was a great way to actually align on where we want to be together, right? So it's not just me and my CX team thinking that. It was a great alignment tool.
Well, I want to go a little bit deeper into that because you shared a couple things really critical. First of all, it was unusual that your your executives were fairly aligned on where you are. We have seen situations, actually it's pretty common, where somebody will say we're a 1 and somebody else, same organization, say we're a 3. And when we do that Slido, they're all answering the same time. So there's no anchoring. They go all, and we see quite a bit of variance. Any hypothesis for why your executives seem to align?
I think I actually am surprised by how, when it comes, our key stakeholders for this is like a group of customer facing leaders, right? So I think they understand intuitively where we are. I think they just lack the language to talk about it in the same way. So I think just through experience of them interfacing with customers and what they're hearing, I think they knew where we were and where we were lacking, where we're falling behind. I mean, honestly, though, if I were to bring this, if I involved other parts of the organization, operational leaders, others, right, who are maybe not as familiar with CX and customer facing struggles and challenges we have, they may have been at a very different place. But I feel like our our stakeholders were very much aligned. And there were some, conversations that were had even before the assessment to talk about why are we doing this work and why is this important? Why should we even looking at CX? So I think there were some previous conversations that also helped them align a little bit more in terms of where we were starting from.
And as you said, that for this specific initiative, not necessarily CX as a whole, you went more with the customer-facing stakeholders.
Yes.
I think I heard you say that like operations, supply chain, they were not part of this initiative. Clearly, they matter in customer experience.
Oh, yes.
Talk through that thought process.
It's almost, I think it was, it's not, I right at this point, we have, of course, them, like, those leaders involved, and they're much aware of what the strategy is and where we're headed. At the very beginning, when we're trying to figure out our starting point, where we want to be, I think we needed people, like we were looking for our, like, the sponsors, right? Like the people who are going to be invested and they understand and they are going to help us get through and actually put that strategy together. That was our purpose for creating that stakeholder group. So it made sense. People were like, this was a group who were passionate about customers and improving that experience. We started there to get their buy-in, to make sure that they're aligned so they could be our champions, right? And our spokesperson when it comes to why CX matters. And that's actually worked beautifully for us and is working really well for us today.
All right. If you have questions, thanks, Chris, right ahead of me. Please post them into the Q&A and we'll get to those later on. We'll hit a few as we go, but let's go out a little bit deeper. But yeah, please ask some questions there. We talked a little bit about this, but was it a tough sell to say, because I heard you say, basically, we went slow to go fast. We took some time to plan about what we want to do for diving into surveys, journey mapping, and so on. Was that a tough sell?
It was and it wasn't. So Marvin culture in general, if I were to stereotype, we are very action biased. We want to see that we are great at implementation. We want to kind of get through and, so from that sense, I think people are like, looking for like, oh, what are we going to do about it? So what am I going to see? Right. And let's start improving. But at the same time, I think it's because let's embrace our failures, right? We've had multiple attempts and it didn't go well. I think people are a little bit more cautious and more intentional about, okay, what was it that we needed? And then it was amazing for our through the stakeholder interviews, realized everyone aligned on we really, the main reason was we really need to shift in our culture and mindset in our organization. Until that happens, all of this is great work, but it's not going to stick or it's not going to last. So because of that, I think it was really like easy for me to kind of relate it back to it's a mindset shift. It's a different cultural shift we need to make. So we need to put the strategy together that makes sense. It's not about just one individual journey mapping exercise or the survey that goes out. They all work together to get to us an end goal. And it's important that we align on that end goal before we actually do any of it. Right. So it was hard. It was, but it wasn't too bad of a battle because of that messy past.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to incorporate Taylor's questions. We talk about one of the things that it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did, which is that overall, especially in B2B organizations, the weakest capability is this disrupt with design. That's the one that most B2B organizations are not terribly good at designing experiences. But for you all, it was the strongest.
Yes.
And now Taylor's question tying into that is, can you talk through the maturity model a bit or terms of the capabilities? Are we meant to go after one and then the next, like a ladder? Or should these things be happening together? Now, my viewpoint is that you can't handle in isolation. That everything, it's hard to continue responding to customers if you don't have the insight, so on. Talk about how you go improve in the model and how did you build that roadmap?
Yeah, and I do see it as a system. Like this is like a system, right? The 6 competencies, even though it's beautifully laid out in a matrix, it's circular, right? Like I created, I think, visual to start to explain our competency model where it's like circular to make sure that we actually have to work on all of them and make sure they actually work. And it's not in reality, it's all over the place. It's not even a circle. So I do agree, Jim, that we have to be tackling all of them. So let's see, like as we're kind of understanding our customers and well, aligning on the strategy, right? And figuring out where we want to be and then actually getting those insights through customers. But then you have to actually prioritize at the same time. But what in order for you to prioritize, you actually need the CX metrics and all these things to be able to quantify and speak, speak of different languages, which I would love to talk about as well in terms of our leaders and how we have to speak different languages to get the right buy-in for them to understand the importance of CX. So it is very much a system in my mind. So we do have to tackle, we are in the process of tackling all of them and really figuring out what are the fundamental things we need to work on first, and then what's second and what's in third, but they are all in like, it's a loop, is how I see it in my mind. And when it comes to disrupt with design, yeah, I mean, just because as I mentioned, I started IDEO, but then started a Marvin Design Lab, which is basically a mini IDEO that we created for Marvin within Marvin. So we were already practicing design innovation capability. We've been building that, investing into that for 7 years. So that's just how, like, we're built to disrupt through innovative products, services, experiences. That's exactly what we're trying and what we've been building. Now, where I get really excited as we expand into this, larger CX management and building the program is that what we were lacking, I also I had a hard time articulating this even 2 years ago, but now I can articulate it, is that we were lacking where we're focusing. We had great innovative minds, but then we may have been working on the wrong things, right? Like what's the most important thing that we should, be innovating and improving and creating new experiences that we can quantify and we can go back and say, hey, and measure and say, this is the impact we've created to our business. It was more based on like a little bit more fuzzier research and analysis. And now I'm excited to be able to actually build very actually synergistic group and discipline to be able to help with both.
All right. Now, are you comfortable sharing where your biggest opportunity to improve was?
Sure. Yes. I mean, like you mentioned, realized value is one of the areas most companies struggle with. It definitely was for ours. And also, actually, there was I'm still familiar, right? Like I'm still getting to know all the competencies, right? Because we ended up reframing it slightly to Marvinize it a little bit. But what was the one under prioritize, Jim? That's the second to last, or
let me go ahead and share here, because some people are asking as well. Let me go ahead and reshare the capabilities, and so.
So respond with action, it was the first part, prioritize. So, and they're related, right? So realize value and prioritize, as I mentioned, for us to prioritize, we want to be able to actually define the business outcome of it. So, so they're related, but those are the two areas that the biggest opportunity areas, and it still is for Marvin. So when it comes to realizing the value, we didn't have any CX metrics that were well defined. We didn't know how to measure what successful outcome of CX would be. So really it's kind of putting that together, is putting some sort of a way and method to be able to start to even measure. But I mean, first identify what those CX metrics are, right? That matters first, and then measuring. I also actually learned, for us to be able to get to kind of, ROI and creating a business case, you also need some other data, right? And like operational data, financial data. It can't be just based on customer feedback and data there. So luckily, I learned over the last year digging in that we actually have a ton of operational data. We just don't know how to look at it through a customer's lens and tell that story. So exciting to kind of figure out. It's a lot of work. I'm still scratching my head as to how exactly we're going to do it, but how to kind of tie those operational and financial data together with customer data to start to actually craft a business impact story, which is, I think, what I need to be able to speak for me to really actually convince some of the senior leaders who may still be a little bit skeptical, right, about what is the impact of CX and why should we invest in it.
One of the things, I'm going off script here, just to warn you, but one of the things that is about manufacturing is that the strength and the weakness is there's so much data That's the good part. There's a lot of data. The bad part is there's
Yes.
so much data, and trying to
Yes.
understand what matters. And you talked earlier about understanding how to talk to individual stakeholders. You just kind of threw it in there, but that's a critical part of that. Is that you talk a little bit about, and I know you're early on, about
Yes.
engaging with the data and using that as you talk to executives. Again, let's remember you're building up the maturity. You're still in that early stages. So I know this is a muscle you're just starting to develop, but share a little bit about what you're learning.
Yeah. There was a moment that it was a huge celebration moment for me and my very small CX team, when there was a turning point when I was at it's called Windows Endor leadership team. It's our kind of our big kind of business meeting with our president of Marvin Windows Endors. And there was a moment when I presented, and I prototyped something and put together like this may be that like, type of thing that you might see, right? And this is where my design background comes in. I just had to prototype and I make it tangible, some sort of visual thing. So I did that, and then it clicked. He realized that's what you're trying to measure. Now I can exactly see how I can now tie it to all the operational kind of like initiatives or financial models, and then he can help me figure out what needs to be tied. So I mean, the learning there was I understood at that moment. So that's what I need to bring to, for example, our president for him to understand the impact of CX versus some other leaders I've spoken with it's more leading with customer insights and their empathy, what they're struggling with, and those stories and the videos that we actually clip, right, to like kind of tell that story in a very short way, short minute. But like there are different ways that we need to kind of engage and feel that passion about customers. And I think that I would actually think about, like again, I use the word prototype. I would actually prototype that with the stakeholders and it's like try on a few different things, put it in front of them and see which one they actually can I take a look at that again, that one slide, and I keep a note that okay, that's what I need to bring back next time, right? And continue that conversation. So I think there are certain folks who are definitely, yeah, triumph for buying. Yes, exactly. So it's like there's certain things that sing for people. It's like I talk about love language. It's like what's his love language? What's her love language with the CX? And just keep a note of that and just make sure I kind of revisit it and hit it over the head with them with that specific method. It's been working for me at least. So
There's so much in there about about what you shared there. So for example, one of the things you shared, I don't know if everybody caught it, you don't have to be an expert on all the data. You have to know somebody who is and work with them,
yes.
but you're using your stakeholders, you're using your peers throughout the organization to help you be successful. Go a little bit deeper into that, because that's something that I found is weak in CX. Is we tend to do things ourselves, but partnerships, that is what makes it rock.
Yes. And I think I in the last year I've met more of my Marvin colleagues than I have in the last 5 years. Like, because through this, I'm like, okay, who's that? Who has that data? And then let me learn, like, and let me lean in. And then at the end of the day, you guys, I feel like most companies, like when you talk to individuals, people care about people, right? Like it's people's experience. So if you actually go back to what customers are feeling, they may just not be aware of that experience that they're actually unintentionally or intentionally like right like creating. So if we can kind of lead with story, then they actually become very interested in what you're trying to um solve. So like anyway, so I mean I got to know a lot of data analysts that I just didn't even know that existed, like those people who existed. So I ended up just talking to them, spending so much time one-on-ones, understanding what are you working on, can you show me that dashboard, oh my gosh, look at this click dashboard, there are like hundreds of them that I didn't realize it existed. Then go deeper. It's almost like doing that user interviews. It's like doing that internally and looking in and understanding our organization. So I totally agree. I think I just had to find the right colleagues and friends and those allies within the organization who actually start to understand the impact and what what we're trying to do with customers and dig in. And then they were able to just say, yes, let me help you. Let me show you this. Or, hey, would this kind of thing be helpful, right? From that conversation. And then they would just send it my way. So it's yeah, it's been amazing to actually like get to know and spend a lot more time with everyone within the organization. I would have never expected the amount of actually help that I would have gotten from them. And it all grounded in customers, and then they understand the value, because at the end of the day, it's people helping people. So
At the last Do B2B Better conference, we had a lot of people talking. A lot of the speakers spoke about doing road shows, getting to meet other people throughout the organization,
yes.
making those connections, and updating stakeholder maps. We heard from one speaker that she updates her stakeholder maps quarterly. That's a lot, but there. Roxy from UKG said that she does a road show every 6 months to get out there and talk to people. So I want to make sure everybody, as you listen to Haemi, that's a critical part to building that coalition, is spending time out there talking to folks, getting them on board. So love that. We referenced about how maturity helped you create a vision. So talk more. I mean, don't share anything proprietary if you don't want to, although I'm sure everybody wants you to. But to talk a little bit more about that building a vision, what it looked like.
I feel like the vision is ever evolving. I have a hard time always saying there's one vision, because I don't have the crystal ball. I don't know, but at least I can share where I think we're headed directionally. And at the end of the day, I think I would see a success if once we actually build this, like CX, we look at CX management as more of a business discipline, equally as everything else, and that we have a way for us to be able to look at experiences equally, at a same level as product, right? And other opportunities that we are investing into. So that's like at the simplest form, I think that's what it is. It's building that the business discipline around creating experiences for our customers, and be able to like speak that language and be able to kind of value at the same light. So really premium experiences the same way as premium physical products. Especially, I bring this up because as a manufacturing company, I'm constantly fighting no, product is not the only, like, physical product is one portion of actually customer experience, and that we need to look at it more like bigger and holistically. I also think it's just like, and somewhere in that vision, there's a bit of, I would love to enable our organization to be able to make more informed and strategic choices. We may make a choice not to invest in those experiences, but that's great. Like, I just want it to be an intentional choice that we've thought about, and we have enough data, and it's informed, right? Rather than just out of gut. It's like, we can't quantify it, so let's forget about it. That's not the way we should do it, right? We should be really actually smart about making some choices. So that's how I hope, like, that's kind of the vision, at least in my mind, for where we're headed with CX management and building that program.
Well, I want to really reinforce, we talked about CX as a business discipline, because that's so critical as a peer with product, which is, for many organizations, very aspirational, but both of them matter. But when we look at that lens, product doesn't just get to sit in a little silo and come up with their ideas. They're out actively talking to the same stakeholders you are. And so that's really important, to be using that kind of lens, that we're not something over in the side. In CX, we are a peer to product, and each of us working together actually makes our product, our experience better.
Yes. And physical product, because we also talk about digital, like all these products, that is such an important part of an experience, but it's not all, right? So we need to work together for us to improve overall our customer experience. There are multiple parts to it, and product is an important portion, but that's not all of it, which a lot of times as a manufacturing company, I think we have the kind of mindset history of that is the center of our universe. I'm trying to just shift that so that we actually start to have a little bit bigger picture.
Oh, I love that. You were offered the CX role, and it took you a little while to think about it. So walk through that decision process for us all.
So as I said, when my CX journey started with Christine Marvin asking me to take this initiative, right? Build this or at least put a plan together. That was the ask. What's that CX strategy? I always thought, okay, well, that's a good project. Like, I can do this, right? And that's interesting. I would love to learn about the CX world. Never thought that I actually would lead that work. I actually thought I would just hand it off to a more experienced practice, right? CX practitioner who would come in, and leader we can hire in or find within the organization to take over. but it's just been a little bit more Marvinized so that our leaders are kind of prepped and we're also more clear what we're looking for. Then things I don't exactly know what happened, but it happened where like I was asked to just take that role. And at first, I mean, I'll be honest, at first I was a little overwhelmed because that was not what my expectation was. And it just seemed a little bit of like there was a lot that I had to catch up on, right? That I was learning, honestly, just drinking out of a fire hose. It really like felt like. But I got really excited about the opportunity to think about really kind of like it is like that customer centricity and human centeredness. Like there's such a like amazing synergy there between CX and the like design world I came from, and I felt like there was a great opportunity for me to kind of see what the two, when we combine it, really integrated what it could do. So that got me more interested, and now I am actually really excited about like the CX and becoming a CX practitioner. I think there is an amazing opportunity for organizations to start to see customers in a different light, and I think there's a huge challenge in front of me. But also, actually, I'm very excited about the challenge.
Excellent, excellent. I have one last question before we turn it over to the attendee questions there, which is just if you were at a conference, whether that's B2B Better, you went to CXPA Leaders Advance, and somebody is brand new looking to start a CX program, what advice would you give them?
I mean, I would I go back to really understanding your stakeholders. So I think stakeholder mapping really comes to mind. I think you need to know who you're working with and where they are at and how you need to speak, right? And I mean, there is the such thing as first impression to everything. So you want to understand where they're at before you introduce anything in a wrong light or like, cast a bad shadow or something, right? So I think it's really important for you to just understand your stakeholders before anything else and create an approach, a strategy as to how you're going to tackle certain stakeholders. So I think that would set you up for success, right? In the long haul. The other thing I actually comes to mind when it comes to maturity model, and if you're kind of looking at that, and that may be just also I'm just new to CX world, but I realized when I was looking at all the different models and frameworks, I actually really struggled because there are many out there, right? And how do I even know how to start to kind of put disciplines or competencies together? And I ended up, and it just all the language there like seems too complex. I actually really like Jim, your ad, right? Like from single word to actually more descriptive phrases. I think it gets much more specific as to what it actually does. So that was really helpful. But my critique of that is it still is inaccessible to non-CX folks. Like it's very specific and complex, and each like word means very specific thing to in the world of CX, but not to the like non-CX folks like our leaders. So I ended up making my own and use super simple language that made sense within our organization, and probably even oversimplified it to an extent, but it actually helps. So I think understanding your organization and your culture and figuring out what the right language to kind of translate that into when you actually speak about it, introduce it, I think that's been actually really helpful. So I guess don't be afraid to question and you can make it your own and own it yourself. That would be my advice. And one other thing would be also, it does help. I mean, like it does help to have experts like who's done this. Like I don't think I could have gone through this without and from Heart of Customer really helping me through all the questions I had. So I think having a mentor expert, however you get that, that access, I think it is really healthy for your sanity check sometimes to also have that safety net as well.
All right, Ben will be happy to hear that.
Yeah.
So a couple of things said there. First of all is one of our clients, a friend of mine, we're talking last week, and she said, "Can we please stop saying inside and outside loop?" I don't know what those mean. I don't know what the differences are. So there's an example, that jargon we use that it took me a while to learn it, but we all know that jargon. But you go to somebody else and say, "Well, that's the outside outer loop." I'm saying outer loop, and they look at you like, "Okay, what language are we in today?"
Yes, yes.
Now, you
It's true.
also spoke about, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm actually giving a presentation on CX along with Christine to our entire sales and marketing team. It's 300 audience in about a week or two. And it's funny. I actually like at my first draft had that inside out, like inside out. I was like, I was just like, and I'm like, no, whoa, okay, I've gotten too far, right? Like, no, this is not, and I had to edit myself. So I totally understand. I'm already starting to actually use that language, which I'm actually glad I'm there, but at the same time, yeah, I totally agree. Some of these are jargons that are really hard for folks who are not CX practitioners to understand.
Yeah, I had a rant on LinkedIn, I think in November, December, about that. And as Chris called it, sent a message to us here, it is the NPS system model from Bain. But just because they came up with these terms 12 years ago doesn't mean we have to use them. And we can come up with better phrases like, so customer response is what I usually call it, outer loop, which is their inner loop. Anyway, customer response and then problem prioritization is more that review all the themes and take action against it. So that's some language we're working on. But yeah, the inner and outer loop. Obviously, I just share. I can't keep them straight. So I think there are others issue as well. Haemi also talked about the importance of stakeholder mapping, and we have I think we had a webinar at least, but we had a white paper that we developed about a month ago on stakeholder management and how can you do that stakeholder assessment, stakeholder mapping, and use that to understand where your stakeholders are and how you can get them to move. And I know you will see a link to that as you leave this webinar, so that'll be something else to look at. All right, we're going to turn now to the Lisa, I want you, if you could walk through the questions. I have one question I do want to announce, which is somebody asked any news on the 2024 B2B conference. And so we've actually just made a change. Nobody else knows this. Our team doesn't know this, but since it was asked, I'll answer it. We're going to hold off till next spring. What we found was that a lot of folks said, well, September, my budget's spent. I went to all the conferences in May. So we're actually going to move it to the spring of 2025. Details still to come. But we are going to have it again. We're just going to hold off a little bit longer so we can get out into the springtime. All right, Lisa's saying, Jim, I don't think you're supposed to share that, but hey, it's out there. So Lisa, let's walk us through some of the questions we have here.
Yep, sounds good. So first question here, Haemi, does the company have third-party partners that serve the customer that were included in the maturity evolution process?
I'm thinking of what are those 30? I mean, no, no, and we didn't, we just included our internal folks for that assessment. Thinking who might have been relevant in that question in that third party group. But I think no, the short answer is no. We included more of the assess our internal folks.
Okay.
All right, and then moving more towards the maturity assessment here on the tactical, are you using something like OKRs to list the objectives and key results for what you called the fundamental first things to work on, and then using those to create alignment and track progress? And then as a follow-up, how is progress being tracked on your roadmap right now?
Yeah, so we did create KPIs for each of these, and it's more kind of milestone KPIs, of course, right now, because we don't have anything that we can kind of track otherwise. So it is more kind of, let's stand up. We're going to expand our VOC program to have 4 listening posts, excellent listening posts by X date or Q2 by end of Q2, like things like that. So we have those all outlined for each of those kind of competencies. And then that's reviewed monthly with our senior leaders and different governance teams as well, to make sure that we're sharing those updates and being accountable for those. So we've created those kind of scorecards, to kind of measure how we're doing on that roadmap.
Well, so we could do a whole webinar on my next question. So I don't want you to go too deep, but you use the word governance. Can you give a quick description of what governance means at Marvin?
Yeah, so I mean, I talked about prioritize what is one of the hardest ones, and it's part of it is because we didn't have the right structure or the process to even prioritize. So what we have started to, I mean, we talked about, at least we have to have the right structure to be able to govern CX. So we just kicked off a council. So we have CX council members who are our working team members who are cross-functional. So we have representatives from every function, pretty much every function. We're actually adding like 2 or 3 more after our first one because of some feedback that we've gotten and interest as well. That we work with monthly, and then we also have our sponsor groups, which are kind of senior leaders, and so we meet with quarterly to review where things are and make some decisions together. So, and then we of course have our senior leadership team, who's also kind of at the very top, getting some updates as well. So we have a right structure with our CX core team actually running and facilitating majority of that work, but that just helps us kind of have a chance for us to stay together, align, and actually make kind of informed and unified recommendation to the right groups to make sure that we're actually prioritizing and putting right resources and initiatives at the top.
And you mentioned earlier you report to Christine Marvin, who is the Chief Marketing Experience Officer. So who is leading that governance? Is that more you? Is that more her? I'm sure it's a partnership, but how are you working together on that?
Yeah, so it's Christine is the sponsor. So she is the leader of the sponsor group. I am the leader of the council member concert groups. And then Christine and I are constantly looking at what are the topics that we want to accomplish monthly. And then when it comes to sponsor updates, which happens quarterly, that's when Christine and I talk about, okay, what's the most important thing? What are the recommendations or updates that's most relevant for that group to provide feedback on or make decisions, right? And actually prioritize. So Christine and I are working together to kind of figure out what the agenda is, but so that's how we're dividing and conquering. Excellent.
Good. And Gloria asked, what's the scope and number of folks on your CX council?
We have, I think it was 12 to, I think we started with 12. We just kicked it off in January. Our first kickoff was January, and there were 12 folks from 3 different locations, 4 people. So, but we've added 3 more, and it is very much cross-functional, anywhere from, of course, marketing and sales, but multiple people from marketing and sales kind of representing different areas, but also operations, finance, and customer service and logistics. I think that kind of, and also different business units like replacement and other units as well that are represented there. Did I answer that question? Were there other parts to that question?
No, that was it. Yeah, just who's on that. All right, Lisa, what else do we have?
All right, shifting a little bit more towards the stakeholder communication piece. Michael asks, have you considered a communication matrix by leader/key stakeholder to show where they are now and where you want them to be to support and then co-own?
I haven't actually thought about that, but that's a great idea. I would love to see what that looks like. But I think that's a great way to also map, how we want to think of a communication in a more strategic way. So I love that idea.
Yeah,
is that common, Jim? Is that kind of common way to kind of, facilitate and make sure that kind of CX is shared in a more kind of strategic way?
I don't know if I'd say common. In our white paper we talk about there is about identifying who's the challenger, who's the champion, different categories, and that naturally leads itself to say, okay, for this individual we have to win over, this individual we have to avoid. I haven't seen a communication matrix created. I like the idea, Michael.
Yeah. And even I would go level to the almost tactics, right? And I think, and what works for individual. I mean, I would love to. That would be actually a really fascinating thing to create.
Yeah, that's
great idea.
And then, Haemi, you mentioned original stakeholders were in customer-facing roles. How did you bring them along other leaders, say from operations or logistics, that could impact the customer experience, but aren't directly customer-facing, so might not have the same beliefs or understanding as the customer-facing leaders?
Yes, there's definitely a gap there. And they're probably at a slightly different place in the journey, but we have customer facing leader team that we meet actually monthly. So that's the group, that's the main stakeholder, the people who are closest to our work. But I actually have monthly readouts to the larger kind of senior leaders with operations, everyone represented. So that's an opportunity for me to actually include them. And I end up actually having multiple kind of one-on-one conversations, honestly, to kind of facilitate and keep them up to speed and ask them for feedback. So I do that a little bit more offline and to just kind of keep them involved to just see if there's anything else I should be aware of. But there are like already at least at Marvin, we have these kind of different groups that gets involved, and I leverage that as a way to kind of keep them informed. I also think with ops and logistics, those kind of folks who are a little bit further away from customer facing, I think I need to get something tangible and more specific that's relevant to them for them to actually react and understand what we mean. So I'm in the process of building that right now, like some sort of a dashboard that actually pulls together ops data and customer data so that they actually understand the more concretely what I mean by it. So I think that would be a critical thing for me to bring to them to like kind of take our conversation to the next level. But we're not there yet.
I remember talking with Jen Zamora, and she was one of the case studies in my book, Do Be Better, and with Dow. And she talked about for them, the hardest group to engage was really manufacturing and to show how they have a huge impact on the customer experience, but a huge indirect impact. And engaging them in the process took some time.
Yes. Yes. And I think there's definitely some tension between what we measure today internally versus what that means for our experience that our customers are having and what kind of effect it has. So I think it's definitely, I think, certain ways that manufacturers have been built over the years, and like historically, it's usually very rarely are kind of looking at it from customer's lens, right? So there's a little bit of maybe perhaps down the road rewiring that we need to do and help reset some of those metrics as well, or at least have a different metric that we need to look at equally, like side by side.
Yeah, most manufacturing organizations are created to be efficient. And so to the extent possible, and yes, they take customer needs into demand, don't build a product nobody wants, but it's not essential. And so I love that.
Mm-hmm. And this one's for Haemi, but maybe Jim, you can chime in too. What advice or resources do you have to successfully initiate a stakeholder meeting?
Luckily, I partnered up with Heart of Customer. So we had Anne, who actually did a lot of those interviews alongside us. I actually think she probably led more than we did, honestly. So, so that was great. Also, luckily, my team actually do a lot of, just from human-centered design kind of practice, we do a lot of looking in interviews. We call it looking in interviews versus looking out, which is more external, right? Customer facing. Looking in is more stakeholder interviews. So our team is also just kind of have practiced that. So I leaned on my team who already do that to actually go into that as well. So that was that's how we tackled those 40 interviews. But I think a lot of it was actually heavy lifting was done by Anne.
And really, when we look at the stakeholder meeting, it depends on which stakeholder meeting we're talking about, but it starts with understanding what, as Haemi said, how do they naturally think? What is the type of communication they like? What kind of data do they do? And using that to link the change you need them to make with tying it back to their data. One of the things that I found is that the hardest group to move is middle management, because middle managers got to be middle managers by hitting their KPIs. And that's what they're rewarded for. Do we hit their KPIs or not? And most in CX can't connect the CX work to those KPIs, which means they're not necessarily going to be listening to you. And so that's a key part, is understanding what are their motivations, what does a win look like for them, and then how does CX help them to accomplish that win? That sounds really easy. That could be a 30-second discussion. More likely, it's about a 30-minute or a 12-hour discussion to get there, depending on what you're looking at. One of our clients looked at the role of inventory and its impact to the customer experience, and that there is a very clear relationship between inventory and customer experience. But articulating exactly what that is was a month-long process to get to answer one question. And so it really starts to understanding, what do they care about? What is the win for them? And how do I connect our work and our needs with their wins?
That actually, Jim, makes me think about your question about what advice do I have to, and one more advice may be, look at current initiatives. Look at what's important to the business already. Don't try to create a new one. Piggyback off of the one that gets actually a lot of attention, right? And try to highlight how you actually have supported and success of that initiative. I actually think that's a great approach to take, and that's the approach I'm trying to take at Marvin as well, because then you have a lot of resources, right? And you're not constrained by that, and you're adding and fueling some of the efforts, and already there's a stage for that team to be sharing updates, so you're not trying to interject or find more time. So I think that's another way to think about kind of finding the places to start and focus.
Well, that's genius advice, because first of all, let me make a wild guess. Everybody on this webinar, your organization is focused on digital disruption. Just a wild guess. There's an example where customer experience has a lot to say about digital, about how to do digital right. And so if you can find those key initiatives organization doing, and then see how your CX data can help to make those initiatives more successful, that's how you get people on board, because you're going in where, Wayne Gretzky never actually said it, but you're skating to where the puck is headed. But you're going up where the organization is focused. So that's a great way of looking at it. All right. Well, thank you, Haemi. I've enjoyed this hour. It's been fantastic. You've got so much to share. Thank you all for being here, being part of this webinar. And Haemi, can people connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yes, please.
All right. I hope you said yes after I asked. So anyway, but yes, thank you, Haemi. Appreciate it. Thanks all for being here. This will be available for recording to go in deeper. And if you have questions about maturity, you want to talk more, please reach out to me, Jim@heartofthecustomer.com, and look forward to talking further.